everybody's willingness to serve in this capacity, to continue the great work for and behalf of the full council, and to have all of your expertise as we prepare for our full council meetings going forward. I know it's asking a lot, but we're confident and appreciate everybody's great expertise serving in this capacity. At this time, we'll open for public comment. The Workforce Arizona Council will open presentations of no more than 3 minutes in length. As a reminder, members of the council may not discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date. If anyone present wishes to address the council, please raise your hand in the Zoom window or indicate in the chat, and you'll be unmuted to speak.
Hello, this is Brian Rice, a council member. I am present. I did not hear my name, but I wanted to make sure I was marked as present. Thank you.
Any comment? No? Okay. Any other comments from the public? Okay. Moving on. We'll move to approval of the minutes from our first quarter meeting. I trust the council members have had time to look through the minutes from our last executive committee meeting, which was held on February 16th, 2023. Do I have a motion to adopt the minutes from our February meeting?
Motion to adopt, Walters.
John, a second.
Motion seconded, Bohannon.
Thank you, Audrey. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Minutes are approved. That will move on in our agenda. Stacey Faulkner will lead a discussion regarding our workforce updates and report out. Please note, council members, there will be a vote following the NPM discussion. Stacey?
Thank you, Chairman Gaspers. My screen was frozen. Sorry, my screen was frozen. So the first item I want to talk about, and I'm really proud to announce that we're going to have our first ever 2023 Workforce Summit, June 29th and 30th at the Desert Willow Conference Center. Many of you should have already received the registration link. If you have not received the registration link, please let anyone on the OEL workforce team know. You can email the council inbox or Kennedy or myself. Excited to share that we are doing this in partnership with 3 regional boards, the City of Phoenix, Maricopa County, and Pinal County. And we're really going to focus on workforce partnerships, economic development, and then regional collaboration and success. And we do have a special guest coming this year to provide the opening remarks. So if you've not yet heard, we have gotten our governor, Katie Hobbs, to come and spend some time with us to talk about the importance of workforce development. And then we also have some national speakers from the National Association of Workforce Boards and the National Governors Association to facilitate the 2 days for us. One thing that I'm very, very proud of with this event is that the National Governors Association has already reached out to us based on our agenda items and wanted to utilize our agenda to share with other states as a best practice so they can have similar events in their states. So Arizona is really paving the way for workforce development by way of this summit. And then a special thanks to DES, who will also be part of the presentation on day 1, but a special thanks to them for supporting the event as well. So if you haven't yet registered, please register, share with your boards, share with your staff. We do have a limit of 300 per day, but we will do our best to make sure we can accommodate as many people as we can. The next item that I have and I want to talk about are some board grant applications that the OEL workforce team has submitted on behalf of the council. So the first application is for $10,000, and this application was with Jobs for the Future, where the council or state boards had an opportunity to gain some technical assistance in a specific area. So our application was really focused on work-based learning. Since we do have some goals that we need to reach in regards to work-based learning this year. We have yet to hear if we were awarded that grant. I know it's small, but it will provide some great opportunities in the future. And then the National Governors Association released an opportunity for $50,000, which will focus primarily on youth apprenticeship policy. So that application is not due, I think, until the second week of June or the last week of June, but we do intend to apply for that one. The only piece that we have missing from that application is we do need to get a letter of support from our governor, which we intend to do. So stay tuned for the outcomes of both of those grants, but very exciting for our council to participate in those two opportunities. The next item that I have, I really just wanted to ensure that if you've received the survey for the Arizona WIOA state plan, please respond to that. Sarah Augustino, the administrator for the Program Oversight and Support Administration at DES, is leading this effort this year. And she really wants to hear from our partners, our council, different workforce areas on what their perspective is on the components that we should make sure that we include into the four-year state plan. The survey only takes about 10 to 15 minutes. If you have any direct questions, I have put the program inbox that you can send those questions to, along with the survey link. You can access that in today's invite. And then though the deadline is for tomorrow, the 26th, Sarah did say that if we needed to extend that, so some of you could respond, just please let her know via that WIOA program at azdes.gov inbox. I'm just going to keep moving right along here because we have a busy agenda. I wanted to give an update on the NTN local plan. So I'm very excited to share that the NTN local plan is complete. It went through its compliance review by DES, in which they did also approve it. They met the deadlines in which the council approved for them when they asked for an extension. And at this time, the only piece that's missing is final approval and signatures from the 19 tribal nations CEOs. So the action item today on the NTN local plan update would be to vote to move a conditional approval pending approval and signatures from the CEOs on the NTN local plan. And I know that we don't necessarily love conditional approvals. However, because they've met all of the timelines and because we won't be meeting again until around September, I really feel strongly about getting this approved for NTN so they can move forward with their operations.
Wash things down the other day, but
Does somebody have a question?
this makes a mess.
We're hearing somebody up there. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. I'll just say that I appreciate all of the discussion that has happened throughout the entire team. It's been significant, and I know that everybody put their best effort to make sure that we get to this point. So I also think encouraged to be easily given know.
Chairman Gaspers? It's a little bit tough to hear you. We could hear Stacy really well. There's a couple comments bouncing through in the box. For some reason, your mic's not picking up as well. If you don't mind, sir.
Okay, it's probably just my quiet voice. Is that any better, John?
Yeah, it's a lot better, sir. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll say that again. You know, I would like to say that I appreciate all the work that's happened to this point relative to relations, local plan. I know it's been significant from conversations that I've had. So I also would feel comfortable with conditional approval recommendation at this point, but we'll hold for any questions for Stacy when you put on the executive committee. All right. Given that, do I have a motion to move conditional approval of the 19 tribal nations global plan to the full council pending CEO approval signature?
Motion to move this to the full council. Walters.
Don, do I have a second?
I second. Hofer.
Thank you, Larry. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, motion approved to the full council.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna move right along here and continue on some updates on the 19 tribal nations fiscal agent update. So over the course of our updates that DES has provided, they have provided some setbacks with NTN fiscal agents and solidifying someone that could serve in that capacity. So they did send out a request for information in which they did not receive any responses. So they met with DOL, who did advise that the tribal leaders as chief elected officials may designate DES as the fiscal agent. And so through many meetings and many conversations, DES did send out some letters for awareness. And if this action is approved, DES will start serving as the 19 tribal nations fiscal agent beginning January 1st, 2023. This next update is also going to require a vote to move to the full council. Yavapai Workforce Development Board has had a couple of failed procurements for a one-stop operator. And so based on the council policy, they can suggest to have NACOG delegated as the one-stop operator, also the youth service provider, and serve as staff to the board. But the council, per our policy, must approve this action. So when Terry Drew, the executive director, reached out and let us know that this was happening, we requested all of the documentation per the policy that showed that they have made every effort in, solidifying a provider through a procurement. Since that has not happened, they have recommended NACOG to be the one-stop operator, and the Board of Supervisors is not meeting until June 7th, but it is on the agenda. And so again, for the sake of time, I don't really want to wait until our Q3 meeting to get this approved. So I would like to suggest that this executive committee vote to move a conditional approval pending CEO approval and signature of that June 7th meeting for NACOG to serve as the one-stop operator in Yavapai County.
Any questions for Stacy? All right, given that, do I have a motion to move the conditional approval of certain provisions pending CEO approval signature and a written letter to the full council?
Motion to approve as read, sir. Walters.
John, second?
I second. Brian Rice.
Brian, I don't know that we have you listed on our executive. We appreciate that you're here, but I need another second.
Again,
I will second. Hofer.
Thank you, Larry. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Everyone's been here. Okay. This combo.
It's gonna be Aaron Johnson.
Aaron Johnson will be leading our next agenda item, discussion about statewide vote.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
There we go. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board members, all others in attendance. I'm going to be presenting an update for the active WIOA grants, specifically looking at the financial review for quarter ending 3/31/23. Next slide, please. So we're going to first talk about the statewide expenditures, looking at both budgets and expenditures for our admin and set aside categories. Then we'll dive into the LWDA financial overview, first looking at the counties and the city of Phoenix, and then finishing up with the 19 tribal nations. Next slide. So here we'll take a look at the statewide expenditures and budgets. From top to bottom, we have listed the 3 active grants, including PY20, FY21 on top. That grant will be expiring 6/30 of 23. The PY21, FY22 grant, and then at the bottom, the PY22, FY23 grant. Please keep in mind that the reported expenditures here that are listed are as of 3/31/23. So there have been a few months since these numbers, but that's the most recent quarter that ended. And then as a note, the Second Chance Center expenditures are captured under the adult 5% admin. So looking at the columns going across, we're going to focus on the PY20, FY21 grant. The 5% admin category has roughly $2.8 million in expenditures out of a budget of 4.1. That entirety will be fully spent down by June 30th, whether through actual expenditures or through FIFOing newer grants such as the PY21, FY22 grant. To the right of the 5% admin category, we have the state rapid response. This money comes from 25% of the dislocated worker program. Traditionally, prior to the PY20 grant, it was held at local area levels, but since the pandemic, it's been held at state level. The budget of that for that is $6 million. No expenditures are listed, but there are plans to have that fully expended as well prior to grant closeout. The column to the right of that is OEO with $5.8 million budget, $2.2 million in expenditures as of 3/31. Again, that funding is will be spent down. And then the 10% governor's office, this is the set aside funding, which is 10% of the total grant designated for statewide activities, set aside for the governor's office with a budget of $10.554 million. And as of 3/31, $2.859 million in expenditures. And then we also have listed the reverted funding from the LWDAs, which is an additional $5.3 million. This was reverted on June 30th of 2022. So all that funding will be fully expended, whether through different activities, projects, or FIFOing expenditures. This will free up some of the PY21, FY22, and PY22, FY23 funding. DES leadership is constantly meeting and strategizing for how to spend down those future funds after 6/30 of this year. Looking at the totals on the bottom, 5% admin, we've expended $5.737 million out of the 11 million. For the rapid response, there's been 180,000 in expenditures out of 23.29 million. OEO has 3.307 million in expenditures out of 8.1 million in allocation. And then the 10% for the 3 open grants totals 28.8 million with 2.85 expended as of 3/31 by the governor's office. Total budget 76.6 million with 12.084 in expenditures. Are there any questions on this slide before I continue?
Yeah, Mayor, thank you for that. One note, I was here on council and I generally recall the discussions around only on the rapid response, not, if you think back, we didn't know what we were facing exactly relative to the pandemic, what that might entail. But now, we're probably at a point where on those dollars, if it's at the state, I think we need more detail to what the plan will be, or reconsideration by the council on that.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. It's difficult to hear you. If that question, it seems like the question regarding specifics for the state rapid response funding. Is that correct? Is that the question?
We're just trying to check out the reason for the audio channel here. We're gonna try. Is this better?
Yeah, so far.
Okay. Relative to the rapid response dollars, and I was here on council, several others were as well. If you think back pre-pandemic, that, you know, we didn't know what we were facing, relative to entering into the pandemic. And in terms of holding those dollars at the state, I think it was in that context. Now we're at a point where, I'd say we need to see a more detail to the plan as to why that would continue, and how those would be expended, if we're gonna continue with that policy and not return to local areas. So it doesn't, not to necessarily answer here today, but maybe for full council, more detail would be appreciated.
Understood, sir. Yeah, I don't have specifics for the rapid response funding. I'm not sure if Lynn is on the call or wants to jump in, but that we'll definitely look into that and note that for future meetings.
Great. Other council members have questions for Aaron?
Yes, Chairman, I have a quick one. You mentioned multiple times in the presentation that the monies would be spent down. So how much of the 76 million is actually obligated and will be spent down? Because if I'm reading it right, we've spent 12 million out of the 76. Am I correct?
That's correct. Right. As of 3/31, 12 million has been spent out of the 76. Through FIFOing expenditure corrections, there are costs for allowable statewide activities that need to be moved and corrected to be charged against the funds available. But that's why specifically focusing on PY20, FY21, there are plans in place through those multiple items like the projects and initiatives. A bulk is going to be FIFO'd from the newer grants to close out, freeing up some of that newer money. But so that 31.89 million will be fully expended by June 30th.
Okay. So the full 76 isn't obligated at this point. So it's all going to be spent down. What's our deadline to spend everything down? Is there a deadline on this one that I'm missing?
Yeah. So the top part, the breakout, so that initial 31 million in the orange is required to be spent by 6/30/23. In the green, the 23 million is 6/30/24, and the blue, the 21 million is 6/30/25.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. You may want to do that for the whole count because I know I'm probably not the only one who wasn't positive on what the burn dates were by that. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Other questions for Aaron? Yeah, that's a good recommendation. Just a note or a column there on those. I think will be helpful when we get the full council. All right, thank you, Aaron. Appreciate the update.
Awesome. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, next we're going to move into the local workforce development areas, starting off with the city of Phoenix. All the next 15 slides are going to look similar, just breaking out each local area. I'll try to go through them relatively quickly, but I will stop after every slide if any of the board members or local areas that are on the call have any questions. So again, these numbers are all as of 3/31/23 for reports received by the local areas as of 4/30/23. For WIOA, the grants are open for 2 years at the local area level. So we have PY21, FY22 listed on top. That grant ends for the local area and gets reverted to the state on 6/30/23. And then in blue, we have the newest grant, the PY22 FY23 grant, which ends at the local area on 6/30/24. For the city of Phoenix, they have $11.1 million in expenditures thus far out of a $14 million allocation. So they're sitting at 79.5% expended as of 3/31. And then the other thing we have tracked on the right-hand side is the federal requirements for OSY and WEX. That's out of school youth percentage and work experience. Those are federally mandated thresholds for the youth program. So our goal is to get 75% or higher for the out of school youth expenditures and 20% or higher for the WEX. So right now, City of Phoenix is currently at 75.3% of expenditures spent on out of school youth, and 20% of the allocation has been spent on WEX. A couple comments I do want to make for all these next 15 slides. Admin allocations are consolidated, so there is a separate adult, dislocated worker, and youth admin pot of money, but we've just consolidated them all as they're non-program specific and can be spent on any of the programs. The DW to AD section, that's dislocated worker to adult transfer. Those are optional transfers that local areas can request by DES to utilize some of the dislocated worker funding to serve adult clients. So in the case of the City of Phoenix, they did get approved for $2.3 million to be transferred from DW to adult. Thus far, or as of 3/31, that category had not been fully expended yet. In the blue, PY22, FY23, City of Phoenix does have $3.78 million in expenditures so far out of a $13.795 million allocation. Again, those funds are good through 6/30/24 to the local area level. So they're at 27.4% expended with OSY of 75.4 and WEX of 1.2. Next slide. Sorry, was there a question?
Yep. Appreciate it. We're good.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick one if you don't mind, sir?
Absolutely, Jim.
I know you mentioned you go through a bunch of slides, I appreciate, and obviously we can pull in the numbers. I guess one of the things that my mind kind of grinds on is I understand they're spending the money, but how effective is the money? Do we have slides later that kind of dive into, hey, we spent X and we had these success rates? Is there anything like that that comes up later?
From as far as the program side and metrics that are attempted to be met, I don't have any of that information. I'm not sure if there's future slides from the program side of things.
Fair enough, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on for Cochise County, 2.143 million has been expended out of a 2.251 allocation, so they're at 95.2% expended. Out of those expenditures, 68.6% has been towards OSY, and then out of the allocation, 28.2% has been expended on WEX. For the PY22, FY23, they're currently 5.7% expended, but again, they have till June of 24 to spend those funds. Next slide. Coconino County right now, as far as reports received by DES, is at 37,903. There was a lot of staff turnover in Coconino, especially with the fiscal staff. Our team at DES has been providing TA, and based on the progress that they've been making, as well as the historical trends, there's no reason for us to think that they wouldn't fully spend down their PY21 funding. Last year they spent 1.1 million. Their allocations 1.2. We just haven't been receiving the reports this fiscal year as of yet. So those are going to be sent in shortly, but right now they're at 3% expended. Next slide. Maricopa County is at 82.4% expended, with 98.2% of those expenditures being out of school youth for the youth program and 7.9% of the youth allocation going towards work experience. They also have spent almost $4 million from the newer grants out of the 17.69 million allocation. So they're at 22% expended for the new one. Next slide. Mojave County is sitting at 69.3% expended for the expiring grants, with 78% of those expenditures for OSY and 7.5% for WEX participants. They've also started working on the DW to adult and the category as well. And for the PY22 FY23 grant, they're sitting at 173,000 expended out of 2.1 million. Slide. For Northeastern Arizona, Navajo County, 88.7% of the PY21 FY22 grants been expended, exceeding the OSY threshold. For WEX, they're reporting 3.3 as of March 31st. And then they have 281,000 in expenditures for the newer grant out of a allocation of a little over $1 million. For Pima County, they're sitting at 91% expended. Our meeting requirements for both OSY and WEX, 8.7 million expended out of 9.6 for PY21 FY22. And for the newest grant, 1.48 has been expended out of 8.4, so they're sitting at 17.6% expended. Meeting requirements already for OSY and about halfway to the requirement for WEX for the new grant. Pinal County is about 57% expended for the expiring grant, 1.68 in expenditures as of 3/31. Out of those expenditures, they're sitting at 65.1% out of school youth, and 13.2% of the allocation for youth has been expended on WEX participation. They haven't touched the newer grant, the PY22 FY23 grant yet. Santa Cruz County is sitting at 42.9% expended, with 47.4% in OSY and 15.3% for WEX. So they're a little under halfway through spending down that grant. And note that there are not any expenditures that they would be able to FIFO. I did want to note that local areas are able, upon request by DES, to FIFO any of the expenditures for the newer grant into the older grant if that's necessary to spend it down. Obviously, in this case, Santa Cruz won't be able to do that as they don't have any expenditures listed. Slide. Yavapai County has expended 1.2 million out of 1.72 allocation, so 69.8% expended, almost meeting the WEX requirement at 72.6%, and the WEX requirement of 20% is they're only standing at 3.9%. Slide.
Go ahead.
For Yuma County, we're sitting at they're sitting at $8.6 million in expenditures out of 9.3, so they're at 92.3% expended, with exceeding the OSY requirement of 98.3, and they're sitting at 13.4% for WEX expenditures. Next slide. Finally, we're going to cover the tribal financial overview. Slide. This screen shows the 19 Tribal Nations Workforce Development Board. So this funding is specifically for board staff and operating costs, not broken out into program expenditures. The board itself keeps some of the adult and youth admin funding, as well as all of the DW admin funding and about 40% of the DW program for those costs. Due to ongoing discussions regarding the NTN fiscal agent, the PY22 FY23 funds have not been allocated to the board yet, and the PY21 FY22 is on an as-needed basis for board staff salaries. So 100,000 has been expended out of an allocation of 626,000. For the board itself, the OSY and WEX numbers are not applicable as they don't have a youth program. And then this is a roll up for the 13 active tribes that operate with WIA under the 19 tribal nations. The expenditures total for all the tribes so far as of 3/31 is 922,000 out of an allocation of 4.3 million, so about 21%. Out of the expenditures, the tribal entities sit at 42.8% for out-of-school youth, and 7% of the youth allocation's been spent on WEX. Again, the PY22, FY23 funds have not been allocated due to issues with designating the fiscal agent I mentioned on the previous slide. And then also in the notes are the portions that are split for NTN's Workforce Development Board as well. And then the remaining 60% of DW is transferred from DW to adult and split between amongst the 13 tribes proportionally. Are there any questions about any of that content?
Thanks, Aaron. Questions from the committee member? I'll just say, I appreciate this data. I think it's helpful for us to understand just situational awareness. Obviously, we want to continue to be collaborative across the board and just be able to make sure that we're aware of the current circumstance and any areas where help is needed. Again, pause for any questions. All right. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move to discussion by Stacy. We'll discuss our funding allocations consideration to move to full council. Note there will be a vote following the discussion. Stacy, over to you.
All right, thank you, Chair Gaspers. First, before we get started, I want to thank Manny Estrella and Dennis Doby for putting together all of our funding allocation tables. They spent a significant amount of time once we received the TEGL with Arizona's allotment. So Manny is actually here today with us in case there are any questions that any of you have that I cannot answer. So with that, I am going to jump in and get started. So just a reminder, funding allocations happen on an annual basis, and WIOA does require the state board's Workforce Arizona Council to assist the governor in really deciding which allocations and which economic factors, formulas we are going to approve for the next program year. So the OEO and DES staff receive the allotment amounts per the DOL guidance, and then they create the calculations based on unemployment data factors and other requirements, which we'll talk about a little bit later, such as poverty and economically disadvantaged, to come up with the amounts for each of the 12 local areas. In summary, for this year's allotment, Arizona has received around 79 million. That's for program year 23. It is an 8% decrease from last year. The state reserve, or the amount that can be withheld at the state level for administrative, governor's set aside dollars and rapid response, is roughly 19 million, which means that the local areas will receive 60 million of that $79 million budget. So this chart is a little bit confusing, and I'll explain it a little bit more in the next slide. But what it's basically saying is we have two formula or two allocation methods that we can use. We can use a formula allocation method, which takes substantial unemployment, excess unemployment, and disadvantaged adult and youth and splits it 3 ways. Or we can go with a discretionary allocation, which is a ratio split. So 70% of the discretionary allocation must be split evenly amongst those 3 factors: the substantial unemployment, excess unemployment, and disadvantaged adult and youth. And then the remainder of that 30% can be split amongst excess unemployment above the state average, or excess youth poverty, or poverty for the adult population as well. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk about which allocation method the council or the executive committee wants to vote on to move forward to the full council for final vote. So again, this is just a recap of that slide that I just showed you. The total funds available for local allocations are based on each local area's relative share of those three factors. So we have substantial unemployment, excess unemployment, and economically disadvantaged. So throughout the presentation, you're going to see those acronyms. Just try to relate them back to those factors. And then discretionary allocation, again, 70% must go to the formula allocation above, and then the remainder can go to different calculation methods to include excess unemployment or excess poverty. There are many factors that we need to consider this year for allocation of funds. So whenever we are talking about annual allocations, we always want to choose an allocation that's going to provide the greatest benefit and the least harm to all areas. So executive committee, if you could remember the three bullets that I have here for adult, youth, and dislocated worker, I'm going to show you an allocations table here in a minute, and I'm going to reference those three. So adult to be, youth to be, and dislocated worker option 1, because those are the three areas that provide the greatest benefit and least harm to all 12 areas. We also take into consideration the continuing impacts of COVID-19 on all of our local areas. I understand through COVID-19 has been very difficult to spend down some of those dislocated worker funds. Keep in mind that the allocation is based on size of the local area's labor pool and the number of unemployed individuals within the local area. There are some significant negative impacts to specific local areas, which you'll see in the chart that I show you. And then there has been reverted funds this past year by several of the local areas. The last decision that we'll need to make as an executive committee today is whether or not we will continue to retain the rapid response allocation at the state level for the statewide rapid response model. So this just kind of breaks down the actual figures that I spoke of a little bit earlier when I gave the summary. So it provides you with the total allotment for adult, dislocated worker, and youth, totaling the little over 79 million. It provides a breakdown of the state reserves. So in all three categories, totaling around 19 million. And then the local area allocations per funding string. So you'll see that it's, for adult, 24 million, take away that, the Arizona reserves drops it down to roughly 20 million. So overall, the local areas will receive little over 60 million in their allocations this program year. This slide is going to show you what those reserved amounts equate to. So you'll see the statewide activities. For example, the governor's state set aside funds equal almost $8 million. That totals 10% of the total Arizona allotment. For administrative, a little under 4 million, and that is 5% of Arizona's allotment. And then rapid response is a little over 7 million, and that rapid response funds is 25% of the total dislocated worker fund. So that's where you get your 19 million and 25% of total Arizona allotment for the reserves. And then this is just another slide that really shows you the breakdown of program funds. So that 60 million overall in those three funding strings, adult, dislocated worker, and youth. And then the percentage of the total state program allotments on the right-hand side. I want to take you over to the allocations table before I go any further, because I want to explain a little bit more in detail what some of those formula and discretionary allocations mean. So right now I'm on the adult allocation. So you'll see along the top, you'll see different options. So you'll see option 1 for the formula allocation, and then options 2A through 2E for those discretionary allocations. So for example, when we're talking about choosing factors that provide the greatest benefit and the least harm to the local areas, I've referenced option 2B. You'll see that there is a pretty significant decrease for some areas. But you'll also see that the amounts listed in that option provide the best benefit. And this is the 70% split 3 ways on substantial unemployment, excess unemployment, and economically disadvantaged. And then the 30% being focused solely on excess poverty. I'd like to pause right there and ask if there are any questions about the formulas before I move on to the next slide.
Any questions? I'll just say, I appreciate all the work that's gone to put this together to be able to see this visually. I also commend the team on the amount of time that we had to review this as an executive committee prior to this meeting. So I'm grateful for that because it is a lot to take in, but thankfully we've had a chance to look through this in more detail. But any questions?
Actually, Chairman, I'd like to echo what you just said. Sending this out earlier in the week or last week was very nice because it gave me a chance to dive into it. So thank you. That was very helpful. I don't know if you're doing something similar for the large committee or for the full council, but I think it was very, very helpful for us.
See,
That's coming still.
yeah, and it's like, that's cheating. It's a public meeting with public funds they needed to tell us.
Is this,
Local area allocations, that's where she left off. And then see, this is where our handout leaves them and she snuck that in.
Terry, you might want to mute your microphone. Okay. All right, so continuing on, I do want to talk about rapid response just a little bit. To provide some history on rapid response allocations and in program year 2020, if you remember, if you were part of the council or committee back then, it was important to withhold the rapid response allocation from the local areas because we didn't know what kind of impact the state of Arizona was going to have, what kind of impact the businesses were going to experience. And so we wanted to withhold the funds for an opportunity to invest in some governor projects due to COVID-19 to support those businesses that were suffering. And then we wanted to give the state of Arizona, DES, an opportunity to develop a statewide rapid response model. In program years 21 and 22, rapid response allocations were not included in the annual allocations for vote. They were withheld at the state level. However, this new policy that we have developed does determine that an annual approval of rapid response withholding does need to be approved by the Workforce Arizona Council. If the council votes to keep the funds at the state level or keep the funds withheld from the local areas, later on in the policy, it does say if withheld, the funds will be delegated to the state entity, which would be DES. So I've talked with the Employer Engagement Administration who manages the rapid response dollars at the state level. And I know this slide is very busy and it's very small, but I just wanted to give you an overview of what's been happening with the use of rapid response dollars. So there was a gap between program year 2020 and 2022. However, in 2022, they started to build capacity to support a statewide rapid response program. So you'll see in the very far right column, which is blue, it does give you some details about what they have done. And I'm not going to read through each of them just because we have a very busy meeting and we have a lot to go over. But you have a copy of this presentation or you can ask questions at the very end. So through building capacity, they did onboard several rapid response team members to support the activity statewide. They have created an opportunity for the local boards to seek funding from DES to support work-based learning opportunities in their communities. They also developed a new rapid response policy. And then they anticipate to purchase 2 mobile units by January of 2025 with some of those rapid response dollars that you've seen on the statewide budget overview. Additionally, within the next year, they intend to invest roughly $2 million on a communication plan and outreach plan to support the statewide rapid response model. And annually, they will assess where other statewide support needs to be delegated or established. So for today, I know that was a lot of information, and I do want to answer any questions that you have. But for today, the executive committee really needs to determine the state, regional, and local economic issues to focus on this next program year. And as I stated earlier, the options that provide the most benefit and the least harm to all 12 local areas would be adult discretionary formula, the 70-30 split, focusing on excess poverty, youth discretionary formula with the 70-30 split, focusing on excess poverty for the youth, and then dislocated worker focusing on unemployment. And then the council will also need to vote on whether or not the rapid response allocation will continue to be held at the state level to support a statewide model or reallocated to the local areas. Back to you, Mark.
All right, first, any questions from executive committee members? And just to clarify that, we still have time here because we have a vote here just to move this to full council. And we'll have a consideration by the rest of our council members there. And if there's any concern, there's time to get that to our state team or to any of the council members. Any questions?
Yes, Chairman, can I ask a question on the rapid response piece, or are we not there right now?
No, please go ahead.
So my question is if we moved it back to the local areas, what's going to take, how much time is it going to take for them to get up and running? Because it sounds like the state's done a very nice job. They're up and running and they've got some good plans going forward. So to undo all that, what's the lost cost in that? Because there's going to be some expenses that, then how long will it take each local area to have a functional program up and running would be what I'd wonder.
So I'm going to take a stab at answering that, and if it's appropriate, maybe we could ask a couple boards. But typically, when rapid response funds are allocated to a local area, there's not necessarily a plan that's put in place to spend those funds, because those funds are provided to provide activities for employers and businesses that are experiencing layoffs, shutdown. And so the expectation is that they are rapidly available to be able to go wherever the need is to support those dislocated workers that are going to be without work, and those employers that may need some rapid attention. For example, in Coconino County, if there was a fire or a flood, the local areas should be able to respond to them, same day or within minutes of hearing that there is an issue. If there's a significant layoff in the city of Phoenix, the city of Phoenix should be equipped to deploy a team to provide services to that employer immediately. So not necessarily a plan, but an expectation that they will rapidly respond to any employer that's in need.
I appreciate that very much. So if I understand it correctly, then we as a board or as a group would have to be very good on our analytics and guessing where the need's going to be so we can correctly distribute it versus keeping it all at the state, where the state then obviously can be responding to if the need's in Coconino, to Yuma, to wherever. That if the state had it, then they could put it exactly where it needed to go versus us guessing today what the future holds.
Thanks, John. Any
I
other
appreciate it, sir.
committee members?
Yeah, this is Kristen, and I don't know do we know how effectively the rapid response funds were used in the local area prior to COVID? And what, what activities were done or used for then?
I'd say, Kristen, I don't necessarily have detail in front of me. That would be something we'd have to look at as a full council. Any others that want to comment on it?
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other committee member questions? And, given the nature of this, I'd say if you're a local area and if you want to comment right now, I would welcome it. And you certainly have the ability to come to our team or to me in the interim as well. If you don't want to do it in this forum, there's other opportunities to communicate. Okay. So we'll take it in that order. Joel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I just wanted, regarding rapid response, there are additional uses of the rapid response funds that are available in addition to the layoff that's traditionally pictured in somebody's mind for the use of these funds. Yes, the majority of them are used for direct assistance to the impacted employees and employers, but there's a list of other types of uses for those funds that local areas, and I guess the state as well, can take advantage of. So it's not just waiting for an event. There's other options for the use of those funds.
Yeah. Thank you, Joel. Dan?
Hi, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. From Pima County's perspective, I would say to the question earlier, are local areas ready to spend these funds? And I would say absolutely that in the past couple of years, we have continued to be probably the largest entity when it comes to rapid response. When there's a massive layoff, I would say most of the staff that responds are Pima County staff. So, over the last couple of years, we continue to do rapid response activities, but, have had to shift either other WIOA funds to cover those costs or to find local solutions, be it general fund or other funding sources to be able to support that activity. So I would just wanted to make that answer clear from our perspective, that we're ready to go. And again, it's something that we continue to do, but don't necessarily have the dollars to support our business services team. And just want to echo what Joel said, that again, we also repurpose other funds to do incumbent worker training and other things that we could fund at the local level with rapid response dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. The
Hi, good afternoon, Chairman and council members. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I do want to echo what my peers shared, both Dan and Joel. I think they really hit the bullet points that I was going to also hit on. Rapid response dollars at the local level allows us to be the opportunity to respond locally very quickly, and then also to utilize those funds to help our local businesses that we're engaging with every day, and those that, as Joel pointed, that are laying off, we're able to respond. And as Dan pointed, we have continued to be the responders whenever a warn letter is either received to our mayor's office, or if it's received to the state of Arizona, we're immediately called upon to interact with that employer to provide those services to those employees. We at the city have also had to figure out ways to ensure that we were still able to provide business services even throughout COVID, because this funding was reallocated back to the state in the heart of when that was happening for local areas. And so we've had to rely on other sources to be able to ensure that we continued our business services. And also, we're able to use those rapid response allocations to be able to help our businesses with layoff aversion as well. So those just kind of echoing what my peers already shared, but thanks so much for the opportunity.
Is it Terry now? Terry?
Hi, good afternoon, Chairman and members of the council. Let me add, support my colleagues as well, but also add that in our local areas, we can have varied definitions of rapid response. And so a rapid response in a metro area might be 25 or more. But in a rural area, it might be 25 or less. So in our Yavapai County plan, we have a response to 5 or more. So that allows us to serve a broader range. And if you look at our demographics, the majority of our employers are what are considered at the state level as small employers. However, they do make up our economy and are important to our labor market. We're responding to those folks anyway, so the additional funds would be helpful.
Thanks, Terry. Nydia next.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. I think everybody just pretty much covered everything as far as within the local areas. I mean, we would be ready to jump in if we had those funds as well. Everybody has pointed out how they do things locally, and it is different in different areas. But we would gladly appreciate if we can get those rapid response dollars back, and then we could, Lucetta talked about layoff aversions, continue to do recruitments and workshops. And I don't want to repeat everything what everybody said, but I echo everything that was said as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Nydia. And then last, Billy.
Chair, I think it would be a wonderful idea to give it back to the local areas. I know in Coconino County and specifically, they'll give us opportunity to build a business team. I know you heard a lot of the local areas talk about the impact of their business team, but in Coconino County, we have not had a business team. We have not had anyone front facing to serve those businesses in need. And in Coconino County, in my 1 year, I've learned that it's not if a disaster is going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. And so what we need is someone that is going to be ready to help those individuals. So having those rapid response funding come back to the local area will not only help us in serving when disaster hit, but it'll allow us to have individuals in place to meet those individuals and meet those employers in those disastrous time in order to make a difference from our local area. So thank you for hearing me out, Chair, and thank you for all you do, committee.
Thanks, Billy. Did we hear from Kristen? You wanna go ahead?
Yeah, I can wait until the other locals have all the chance. I just had another question that I am formulating as I'm listening. Or I can go now, whatever works best.
1 second, Kristen. Iracema?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Chairman and members of the board. I am gonna agree with what all our colleagues have said. I believe that, again, like, we haven't had a business service rep, and I know this rapid response fundings would be so helpful for us to start having that within our county and providing the assistance. So I agree with what everybody says, that locally we need those funds.
Thanks, Iracema. We're ready to Kristen, go ahead.
Thank you. So we went through the slides, we're indicating where people's spending levels were. Everybody across the board spending levels are not, like, we're looking at having to I'm in the same situation, right? Looking at having to FIFO things to make sure we're spending down in the right period of performance. There's flexibility within the grants, and I think I'm hearing that the monies can be shifted to use for rapid response activities out of the initial bucket of funds. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly? So if there's an activity, funds could be shifted to address that. And then if something were to happen, then there could be a request to DES to say, we had this activity, we shifted WIOA funds. I'm just wondering what the flexibility levels are there.
I read it that way, but Stacey, do you want to?
Yes, so if I can just go back to one slide here, bear with me. So basically, what DES has developed ongoing for a statewide model is for the local boards to have access to the money as needed for any type of event that would fall under rapid response. So you'll see the middle section here. I think that's probably, Kristen, what you're asking about is if they have access, if they run out of some of their normal funds, could they get additional funding to satisfy those activities? And so I don't know what the process is. I think that there's a formal request and evaluation through DES, but they can submit a request to access some of those funds.
Yep, thank you. That was part of the question. And then part of the question is the flexibility of the money. If it's allocated, it's WIOA, you know, I saw out of school youth and WEX and, you know, all of those different items. But
Yeah,
is there flexibility?
They're dislocated worker formula funds.
So that could be flexible to move between whatever criteria or whatever activity needs to be paid for.
Yeah, there's actually a document that was put together at the DES level that talked about what activities were allowable under a rapid response, and then what activities were allowable under the statewide activities for the use of rapid response dollars. I'm not sure if that would be helpful, folks, but we can certainly send it out if it is.
Yeah, then my apologies if I've just like overlooked all of that information in the past. So thank you for answering my questions.
Yeah. Somebody else raised their hand. Steve? Then Dan, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say to that, you know, of the process, and it has been very nice that the state has allowed to share some of the funds with us. However, you know, the problem that we see at the local level is, you know, these are events that happen in our communities. And, you know, again, I think the intent of our services and the intent of these funds are indeed to be rapid, right? So we're responding to something that is happening that is impacting the lives of our neighbors, you know, who are experiencing something that is probably one of the worst things that's ever happened to them, you know, losing their jobs. So, you know, being able to have those funds at our disposal to be nimble to the situation rather than having to be reactionary to it, I think just benefits the end user, in our opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. We have do you have another?
Hi, this is Lisetta. I wasn't sure, Chairman, if you were open to me speaking.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to echo what Dan shared and also to add, there is a logistical process on the back end to be able to request those funds, to Dan's point, which does not allow local boards to be nimble. Many of us, you know, operate within a city or county municipality, and there's procurement laws and regulations that we have to follow. We all have an IGA with the state of Arizona. And so anytime we've requested these funds, we've actually been asked by DES to have a separate IGA for requesting these funds. I have, you know, tried to work as far as like, could we just amend our current IGA? Because there, you know, we have to go to our boards for approval to receive. We have to go to our council or board of supervisors in order to receive funds, because some of us are not able to just receive them automatically. And so allowing the funds to be provided to the local areas definitely provides more of a nimble opportunity, because we already have a current IGA in place with DES that determines what our allocation is going to be on a annual or biannual basis.
Thank you. And Steve? And then we're gonna move on. Just get through the agenda. Steve, did you have a comment? Okay. Well, so what I'll say is, I am super grateful to everybody that's here. You know, I think we talk a lot with the other chairs about the function of the council. And there's been a fear that it's been, you know, either less engaged or rubber stamp. And I'd say I'm really grateful that all the council members here, I think, were really engaged in this discussion, and the executive committee members here in all the local areas. And I really appreciate that DES and all the effort that the team puts in and trying to think through what's going to be best for the state, but all the work that the local areas are doing day in, day out. So given all of that, there's a lot for the full council to consider. And what motion I'll make, unless I'm told I'm doing this wrong, is purely that we're going to move consideration of the allocations to full council. But having given the executive committee a chance to be more informed, will provide us a better opportunity to inform our fellow council members. And I'd welcome you to reach out to us in the interim, and we'll provide a forum for discussion at the full council as well. So I would just move that our allocations and rapid response be moved to the full council for consideration without a recommendation either way, just for full council. That's one way.
Yep.
Do I have a second?
Second, Walters?
Thank you, John. All those in favor of moving consideration of this issue to full council? Say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, we will move this to the council without recommendation and the full discussion. Thanks, everybody, for that. We appreciate everybody's engagement on it. Okay. Stacey?
All right. All right, I am going to move into providing our very first work group update, which was development of a council strategic plan. So the strategic plan work group was primarily pulled together to write a strategic plan for the next 4 years for our council to make sure that we were focusing on the priorities established in the first quarter meeting, full council meeting. The structure of the work group actually brought together many different partners. You'll see we had board representation, we had our partners at DES, council members, all 4 titles were represented, business services and the OEO workforce team. We did meet every 2 weeks until we accomplished what we set to accomplish. The timeline was very, very quick because we knew that we wanted to get something in front of the council for approval this quarter. So you'll see March through May, we really spent a lot of time defining goals and objectives. We had a couple different working sessions where we defined strategies that would support the agreed upon goals and objectives of the council. We drafted a plan. Kennedy on our team beautified the plan. Thank you, Kennedy. We got a lot of feedback from all of the members on the work group so that way we could make edits as needed and necessary for a final plan. And then just this month, we finalized the plan to share with you. And I'm actually going to go to the plan if it's okay with you and just share a snapshot of what it looks like. So this is our council strategic plan, which I'm going to ask you to vote on today. The executive committee did receive a copy of this prior to today's meeting in your packets. So it gives an overview of the council and what our charge is. It gives an executive summary, and I'm sorry if I'm scrolling too fast, but you can refer to this in your packets. It talks about really what our priorities are and what we really want to focus on as a council. And remember, our mission is to really move away from being such a compliance council to more of a collaborative council in setting the expectations for a statewide integrated system of delivery for Arizona. We incorporated our new council mission and vision, and then we really felt it was important to settle on some guiding principles that would allow for us to move the needle forward. Getting into the goals and strategies, there are, I think, 4 that we've identified in this strategic plan, the first being digital equity and inclusion. So you'll see we have developed a goal and several strategies for each of these sections that we intend to accomplish over the next several years. Work-based learning will also be a priority. Again, goals and strategies attached. The same for youth. And then advanced manufacturing. One of the areas that we really want to focus on, and I think that the discussion today has been very robust and will allow us to move things forward, is our workforce system in general. And so we spent a lot of time talking about how we could reach the goals within the workforce system, understanding that reauthorization may be coming, and understanding that that the council is really focused on using data now to drive a lot of our decision making and increasing accessibility. And so we've ended the report with a conclusion on how we're going to make these things happen. Excuse me. And then a thank you to all of the partners that participated in this work group. And that is our strategic plan as developed by the work group. So today I would ask the executive committee to vote to recommend approval of that plan at the full council meeting on June 1st.
Any questions for the team? Well, I just want to express my thank you to our first work group and all the time and attention that everybody put into that. A great test case for us for our new structure and really gets us positioned to be able to take off and hear from the best of all of your thoughts as we put together our new work groups going forward. We had to start here and make sure we all knew where we're headed. With that, I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the strategic plan for consideration of the full council. Or do I have a motion, I should say?
This is Kristen. I was a part of the work group, so I'll go ahead and make a plan to recommend a vote to move the approval of strategic plan to the full council meeting.
Thank you, Kristen. Do I have a second?
This is Audrey. I will second.
Thank you, Audrey. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. We'll move to the full council. Thank you, everybody, for all the work on the plan. Right, I think Kennedy, you're up. We'll have a discussion on our number of WAC policy.
Good afternoon, executive committee members. I'm going to be going over the 3 policies that we have today for review and approval. The first being our WIOA local board governance policy. Our second being the one-stop operator and service provider selection policy. And lastly, the certification of our job centers, which includes 2 certification tools. So you all should have received that in your packet ahead of time, so you could look at those. And then just to note, the public comment period for these 3 policies was open for 2 weeks, March to April. And then we also work collaboratively with our partners at DES on these revisions. So the first policy that I'm going to go over is the local board governance policy. So what we did with this policy is we revised all of the references in the policy to make sure that they were up to date and aligned with all of the CFRs, TGLs. We added some definitions to the beginning of the policy so that local areas would know the definitions for our chief elected official, our local workforce system, and then the Workforce Arizona Council. We added some additional language under section 4 regarding removal of board members, which states that based on the bylaws of the board, boards must identify the specific criteria used to establish just cause and process the removal. It was brought up a few times from local areas that this had been an issue in the past. So we wanted to be very clear for local boards that their bylaws need to identify what criteria is used to remove a member. We also added some references to DES policies. And then lastly, we added in language regarding board composition and optimum policy making authority. So this is currently, we're currently seeking DOL guidance on this issue. So once we have that resolved, I'm going to be bringing this back to the council. So we're going to be just sending this to the full council for approval. And hopefully by next week, we'll have all of the clarifying language and I'll be able to present more on that to you all. Any questions on this side? Okay, so the next policy I'm going to go over is the one-stop operator and service provider selection policy. So this directly impacts our local boards. So within this policy, we again included some more definitions for the one-stop delivery system, our Arizona at Work job centers, our council, the state administrative entity and service provider. One thing to note is when we were working with our partners at DES, we were advised that we had language under section 9 stating that an MOU was a legally binding contract. And we needed to remove that because MOUs aren't legally binding. And then we added some additional language, which we received from local areas, asking us to include that the grant recipient / fiscal agent has the option to provide directly some or all of the youth workforce activities. And then lastly, we simplified the language for some sole source procurement for boards regarding the one-stop operator. So before this, the process was really long and confusing, and we wanted to make it very clear so that our local workforce development boards could easily provide the council all of this information. So if a local area wants to do sole source procurement for a one-stop operator or service provider, these are the steps that they need to take. And then all of these steps have to be provided to you all as council members for approval. So we just needed to simplify that for them. Any questions? Okay. And the last policy is the certification of the Arizona at Work job centers. So we really did redesign this entire process. Before, the process was really confusing. I used to work at a local area and I had to do this process. So when I came over here, I understood that we needed to really revamp it. So before, we had 3 different certification tools and they all said the same thing in a different way. So we cut that down to 2 different certification tools, which is for the comprehensive centers and then for the affiliate and specialized sites. And so now we're going to just be requiring the boards to submit a letter to the council certifying their comprehensive centers, and then you all will be approving those job center certifications. Just remove some duplicative language throughout the policy. And then we also removed the requirement for board members to certify job centers. This provides a lot more flexibility to the local areas on the certification teams. We make sure to keep the language in the policy as to who cannot serve on those certification teams. So for example, the one-stop operator is not allowed to serve on that team. And then, like I said, we created and simplified those 2 assessments. Any questions? Okay, I'll hand it back to you.
Any other questions for Kennedy or the rest of the team? And again, I appreciate all those that did take the opportunity for public comment. Thank you for that. And also thank you to Kennedy and the team for getting it to us time for this committee to review. If there's no other questions, I ask for a motion to recommend approval of all 3 policies at the full council meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Walters.
Thank you, John. A second?
Second, Bohannon.
Thanks, Audrey. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. Release to full council. Thanks for all the great work on that. Next, we are over to Jennifer Kelly, who will be leading discussion on the local workforce development board recertification. Please note there will be a vote following this discussion. Jennifer?
Thank you, Chair Gaspers, and good afternoon, everyone. So next slide, please. So I just want to give a quick overview of the local workforce development board recertification. So this is covered in section 107 of WIOA, and it states that the governor shall, it states that the governor shall certify a local board per local area every 2 years. So the last recertification cycle was in 2021. So we're due this year. WIOA also identifies the criteria for board recertification, and they are noted on the screen as well. So the first criterion is board composition, as well as standing committee composition, if a standing committee is established in the local area. Now, I do want to note that our state policy actually has provisions on board vacancies, so that if the composition is not fully aligned with the criteria yet, because of vacancies. So the local areas are allotted 120 days to fill those vacancies. So the second criterion is the extent to which the local board has ensured that the local area activities have enabled the local area to meet performance accountability measures. So for this specific criterion, we actually looked for the actual, we looked at the actual performance measures for each local area for program years 2020 and 2021. And then we also considered the results of governance monitoring for calendar year 2022. So this governance monitoring was actually conducted by our quality assurance team within the, So it was conducted by our quality assurance team within the Division of Employment and Rehabilitation Services. So I'll go ahead and pause until we get the slides back up.
You got that right in there.
So I'll go ahead and continue. So the last criterion for certification is the extent to which the local board has ensured that the local area activities have enabled the local area to achieve sustained fiscal integrity. So for that,
Well, are we gonna be gone? You want Jason's anything?
If you could. Brandon and her.
So for that last criterion, we looked at the results of our fiscal monitoring for calendar year 2022. And that monitoring was completed by our Finance and Business Operations Administration, again within DERS. Thank you. So next slide, please. All right, so subsequent to our compliance review, we are recommending all 12 local workforce development boards for recertification. Again, just noting that the 19 tribal nations are working on resolving any fiscal monitoring findings. So we also want to note that we are sending communication to all 12 local boards to inform them of this recommendation for recertification, as well as to provide the result for each component that we looked at, and also recommend any action steps that need to be taken for continued compliance. So it's going to be a more detailed communication with our local boards. And then finally, we do plan to host a post-recertification meeting with our local areas as well as our stakeholders. And this will just give us an opportunity to answer any questions about the certification criteria and also to provide technical assistance as needed. It'll also give us an opportunity to gather feedback on the compliance assessment process. Next slide, please. So really on the next couple of slides, we just have the list of our local boards as well as the criteria that we looked at for recertification, and then noted whether or not those criteria were met. So on this slide, we have City of Phoenix, Coconino County, Maricopa County, Mojave La Paz counties, 19 tribal nations in northeastern Arizona. Again, the chart essentially showing that the criteria were met. And the next slide, please. And then on this slide, we have the next 6 counties, next 6 boards. So we have Pima County, Pinal County, Santa Cruz County, Southeastern Arizona County, Yavapai County, and Yuma County. Again, showing the criteria and that they were met by the boards. Right, and that is it for the board recertification. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. We had a little technical difficulty on our end, but I think we've got most of it. Any questions from the committee members? All right, in that case, do I have a motion to recommend the 12 local workforce development boards for recertification at the full council meeting?
So moved, Walters?
Thank you, John. And a second?
This is Kristen, so moved. My
Thanks,
second.
thanks, Kristen. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? It moves to the full council. Thank you, Jennifer. Do any of the council members have any change they wish to make to the agenda for full council, or any final remarks before we move to close the meeting?
I just had the question about whether or not folks were going to be able to see that funding information in advance the way that we were. So I don't know how much time people will have to be able to evaluate those data and those options. So.
Great question, Audrey, and looks like the team can get that out tomorrow. So that should give plenty of time for council members to review.
This is Kristen also, and it's just a logistics question. So meeting minutes are public because we had a lot of question and answer, right? And a lot of kind of dialogue. And so is that information also available to people?
Yes, so we try and turn it around as quick as we can. But I will do my best once we have it written up to Maren and the team to get that reviewed and then posted.
We're also recording this, so that'll be a fun as well.
Where's that?
The recordings are on the it's in YouTube, I believe.
Okay.
On our website.
So I don't know if you caught Kristen, but we'll get those minutes turned around expeditiously. And then also the recording will be available on ETA YouTube.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? If not, then do I have a motion to approve the agenda for the full council meeting?
So moved, sir. It's Walters.
Thank you, John. Second,
Second, Bohannon.
Audrey. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. All right, the agenda is moved for full council. Just a definite huge reminder, tell all your friends. We typically have had it here at ACA. I'm just here in person today, just FYI, because I was here previously for a meeting. So appreciate that everybody, we were in virtual format for the most part today. We will obviously always have that hybrid format available, given geographic diversity across the state. But this quarter we will have our meeting in Maricopa County. We want to extend our huge appreciation. They graciously provide their conference facility located at 301 West Jefferson Street, second floor. Please let the team know if you have any issues getting that detail again, or if you miss it, we can send it back out. It'll be in the notice as well. But please make a note of that and tell folks do not come to the ACA. Or if you do, you'll be zooming in, taking advantage of the hybrid option as well. I know, we had a busy meeting. I know people have really busy schedules. I really appreciate the robust discussion that we had today. This is exactly what we hope for. I think we're going to have a great robust discussion with full council as well. One thing I want to provide time for, if I ever can, within the time frame that we stated, is to have a roundtable open forum for the executive committee, and then in the case of our full council, to provide any feedback on what's going on with your industry or feedback that you want the system to hear. So just opening up the floor, if there's anything particular with your industry that you want to end with, I would just provide that time for you now, and we'll keep that as a practice going forward, so we can have a chance to have the feedback from the great expertise of all of you that are participating in the council format. So I didn't give you much heads up, so if you don't have any today, that's okay. But any of the executive committee members that have any items that they want the team here? And I'll just start, just throwing it out there that we've had some great discussion and great work on semiconductor. I came from the task force meeting. I was looking at semiconductor workforce. I appreciate the attention to that. You know, one of the things that's on the top of my mind, just from a manufacturing perspective, is how we are ensuring that as we have a huge opportunity in this state with semiconductor, other states with other areas of manufacturing or other industries, there are times when our approach as a state may or may not be sufficient to invest in the education partners that we're looking to. So I'd say we always want to make sure that we're doing our best practice that we can with WIOA, obviously. But when you, from a local area perspective, are hearing whether direct from your businesses or if you're hearing from your education partners that they are not receiving the support that they need, I think that's something that we as industry want to know and need to lean into to help. And make sure that we're having the opportunity to understand what those challenges are, so that we can then go advocate as businesses in the state with leaders to identify what those potential best practices can be to supplement the great work that happens here in the WIOA system. So throw that out there as my first take. Any others before we conclude? And with that, again, we just remind you, please mark your calendars for the Workforce Summit on June 29th and 30th at Desert Willow Conference Center. And we'll be seeing you soon for our full council meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved, Walters?
This is Audrey second.
Thank you, Audrey, second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, none. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.